Now, before I go any further, I want to talk about symbology and the definition level of a solution. You may have noticed in the previous video about degrees of freedom that when I added a constant constraint and I removed all the degrees of freedom from a solution, the element turned white, or the construction element turned white. That's to indicate to us that the solution has 0 degrees of freedom. So in essence, MicroStation is taking control of the symbology of that element. When the degrees of freedom are 0, it'll change your constructions to white, and when it's more than 0, if I delete that constraint, reevaluate, it'll change it back to yellow. It may seem a bit restrictive at first that it's taking control of symbology, but it's better because it provides instant feedback and you know what the status of your solution is. If you over-define a solution, it'll change the symbology again. It won't change the symbology of the constructions, but it'll change the symbology of the constraints themselves. If I try to remove another degree of freedom from this line that already is locked, it's going to do something else on me. It turns the geometric constraints red. So as soon as you see red, you know you've over-defined and you've got a redundant design. You also get a message down here at the bottom in all caps saying over-constrained. So as soon as you see that, the best thing to do is Control-Z, edit, undo. Because once your design is redundant, it's going nowhere. You're better off to take a few steps back and start working again. Okay, so that's how it takes control of symbology, and the definition I'm talking about here is how well defined your solution is. So if it's under constrained, fully constrained, or over constrained, we get different types of symbology. I should also mention MicroStation gives our constructions and geometric constraints a default class. Some people may not be familiar with what a class is anymore because it's not used as much as it used to be. If I select the construction and information that, we see we have a class value here, primary or construction. And MicroStation defaults all of its constructions and all of its geometric constraints to the construction class, which means they can be turned off and on the view display and during printing, or during printing I should say. As simply as this: turn on view attributes, turn off constructions, and turn them on again. In the default installation of MicroStation, the F8 key will toggle constructions on and off, so that's quite handy as well. There is one exception to this rule actually. I'm going to put a point on this line, constrain a point on the line, and fix it. Now the fixed geometric element is actually defaulted to your active element class, which for me here is primary. So if I toggle off constructions, you can see the fixed element has remained on, although we can override it and change it. If we want to change it, use change element attributes, change that to construction. Now as I toggle on and off, it all disappears. We can override the symbology, and as we edit, modify and resolve, it remains persistent. However, it won't remain persistent after a full reevaluation. Remember, this button here will give us a full reevaluation, and this one will only modify and resolve. So if I give the solution here a full reevaluation, it will reassign the default symbology. MicroStation will not reassign levels. Your levels are free to use as you want, so if dimension driven design won't override your levels, so whatever levels you place an element on, it will remain there. But okay, well, we see more examples of that as we move on later on, but I have to explain that now because it'll be showing up in the videos as we move along, and I don't want it to cause confusion later on.